This is the White House, home of the executive branch. In the first lecture, we discussed the Constitution. In the second lecture, we dealt with the legislative branch of the US government. Today, we'll be discussing the executive branch and the President of the United States. The President of the United States is by far the most important component of the executive branch. It is the executive branch. So we'll start with him. And really, this lecture is going to be about the President. Afterwards, I'll have a look at the role of the Vice President, that person who is one breath away from the presidency. Then, federal departments and other agencies, the people who work for or under the President. And finally, we'll have a look at the current situation with the preeminence of the executive, the fact that the President has become the most powerful political person in the United States, which is not exactly what the Founding Fathers had envisioned. Let's start with Barack Obama. Barack Obama was elected for the first time in 2008, beating John McCain, and he was re-elected, somewhat surprisingly, against Mitt Romney. When I say somewhat surprisingly, I refer to the fact that the United States were and are still in a major economic crisis, which is usually not a good omen for incumbent presidents. Barack Obama is the President of the United States, and as such is the head of the executive branch. He does have people working under him, though. The first of these people is the Vice President, Joe Biden. Joe Biden was already Barack Obama's Vice President during his first term, and is a plausible candidate to be the Democratic presidential candidate in 2016. The White House Executive Office, close advisors, speechwriters, people in charge of communication, the people who work directly for the president, helping him shape his policies, helping him get his message across. Then the executive departments, such as the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, they would be les ministères in France. They deal with certain areas in American politics. The Department of Defense deal with military matters. And finally, you have independent agencies, agencies which are part of the federal government, but which are not part of specific departments. The FDA, Food and Drug Administration, for instance, which is in charge of regulating drugs. Well, the FDA is an independent agency. It works within the executive branch, but it's not part of a specific department. This is the structure, but really what matters is the president. You may recognize these people, but who are they? From top left to bottom right, Bill Clinton, a Democrat, George W. Bush, Republican, Barack Obama, Democrat, Mitt Romney, his opponent in 2012, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and George Bush, the father. The last presidents of the United States. Before Ford, Richard Nixon, who had to resign in '73 following the Watergate. According to the Constitution, Article 2 of the Constitution, the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. It's very short. It means that there is no such thing as the executive branch, really. There is a president who is the executive branch, and he has people working for and with him. And what's striking if you read the Constitution is that Article 1, which defines the powers of Congress, is a long, detailed article with the enumerated powers and a long list of details. Not so for the President of the United States. It's very short, it's very concise, it's much less precise. And of course, because it's much less precise, it's more open to interpretation. And presidents have been using these interpretations to increase their own power, while the powers of Congress have been and still are severely limited by what is written in detail in the Constitution. Who can become President of the United States? Well, you must be 35, you must have lived in the United States for 14 years, and you must have been born in the United States of America. I've shown you a picture from The Simpsons, the movie from 2007, and there's a joke which is now a bit dated. The joke is that Schwarzenegger, the Austrian actor who played in the Terminator movies, is the President of the United States in 2007. Of course, it's impossible, because he was not born in the United States. But when Schwarzenegger was governor of California, there was a serious movement to change the Constitution, to amend the Constitution, to allow him to run for president, at least. But this idea that a president must have been born in the United States is still relevant today, or was still relevant in 2011, because Barack Obama was accused of having been born in Kenya, as opposed to Hawaii, which is American territory. And these people argued that if he was really born in Kenya, then he could not have become President of the United States, because if you want to be president, you have to have been born in the United States. And eventually, in April 2011, Barack Obama had to produce his birth certificate to prove that he had been born in Hawaii and not in Kenya. The president is elected for 4 years, and he can only be elected twice. So Barack Obama is now in his second and final mandate. You remember that this idea of having only 2 terms for the president, 8 years, was first a tradition, which started with George Washington, and then became the 22nd Amendment in 1951. And you may also remember that in the previous lecture, I used the phrase lame duck Congress. Well, the same phrase is sometimes used to refer to presidents during their second terms. Presidents, after their first terms, cannot be re-elected. And because they cannot be re-elected, they may feel less involved, less responsible. They have nothing to fear, but they have nothing to gain. So they are sometimes called lame duck presidents. And usually, presidents in their second term find themselves unable to accomplish much. So in the cartoon on the right, you see George W. Bush as a lame duck towards the end of his presidency. How do you elect the president? It will not surprise you to learn that it's a long and complex process, and that it has a lot to do with the Federalist Compromise at the heart of the American political system. Basically, to become president of the United States, you have to belong to one of the 2 major parties. It's possible to run if you're not a Democrat or not a Republican, but it's so difficult that third-party candidates do not get elected. So you choose your party. Then you have to become the official candidate for the presidential election, because other people in the party will want the nomination as well. So candidates in a party compete in primaries and caucuses. Primaries are elections organized in each state, in which you ask voters to select the candidate. Caucuses are small discussion groups of voters who are usually politically active and who choose the candidates. Primaries can be open, everyone can vote, or closed, reserved to registered voters, people who declare themselves to be Republicans or Democrats. So open, everyone can vote. Closed, only members of the party, registered voters, can vote. So the party chooses his or her candidate. Then the president chooses a vice president. It's called the ticket, president plus vice president. Let me just add a word on this idea of registered voters. You have registered Democrats, registered Republicans. When you register to vote, when you put your name on the list of voters, you can declare a political preference. You can declare that you are a Republican voter or a Democratic voter. And if the party organizes closed primaries in your state, you can only vote if you are a registered voter for the party. If it's an open primary, everyone can vote again. So let's say you have won in your primaries. You have been chosen to be the candidate of, in this case, the Republican Party. The Republican Party is symbolized by an elephant, is represented by an elephant. So you are now the official candidate for the Republican Party. How do you win? This is where it becomes complicated. A simple system is a French system. Everyone votes, you count the votes, and you elect the president. Well, you have two ballots, but you elect the president when he gets more votes than his opponent. Not so in the United States. Because in the United States, you have something called the Electoral College. And as you can see on this cartoon, it's not anything new. This is Taft planning his political campaign. And you can see that each state, California 25 votes, Nevada 3 votes, Idaho 4 votes, Oregon 3 votes, etc. Each state has a number of votes. In order to become president, you want to win the votes in a given state. All the states have a number of votes, and you count the votes from the state. It sounds difficult, it sounds complex. That's because it's difficult and complex. So pay attention. There are 50 different states, 50 different races. You have to win in one state, because if you win in one state, you win all the votes in that state. Let's come back to the map. California, 25 votes. If you have a majority in California, which is right here, if you have a majority in California, then you have the 25 votes. If you have 45% in Nevada, you get 0 votes. So if you have the majority in one state, you get all the votes it has in the Electoral College. That means that most states do not matter. Democrats will win in California. That means that most states do not matter. Democrats will win in California. Democrats will win in New York. Republicans will win in Texas. So these states do not matter because one party has a majority and knows it has a majority. These are safe states. On the other end, you have states in which there is not a clear majority. Florida, Ohio, a few others. These are called swing states or battleground states. These are the states which matter in a presidential election. And it's unfair because the candidates will promise many things to the people in these states. They will visit these states. They will not go to California, even though it's the most important state in the United States, because it's not a swing state. How many votes does a state get? Well, it gets a number of votes, a number of electors, based on the number of representatives in Congress. So the number of representatives plus the number of senators, meaning that even the smallest states will have one representative plus 2 senators equal 3 votes. Small states are overrepresented. The Electoral College is not the popular vote. You can get more votes than your opponent throughout the country and still lose the presidential election, because you have to win in each state. You have to have to win a majority of votes in the states. Let's take an example. You have 3 states. It's a very simple example. 3 states. State A has 10 million people. State B has 5 million people. State C has 6 million people. So 12 electors, 7 electors, 8 electors in the Electoral College. Let's say you win 80% of the votes in State A, but you only do 40% in State B and State C. What do you get? You get 12 electors in State A, 0 in State B, 0 in State C, because you only have a majority in State A. Overall, you will have almost 60% of the popular vote. 60% of the people will have voted for you. But in the Electoral College, you will only have 44% of the votes. You will lose the election. Why? Because it's no use winning a state with 80%. What you want to do is win the highest possible number of states with 51% of the votes. Whatever you have beyond 51% does not matter. So you've lost the election even though you received 60% of the votes. And this has happened. This is the electoral map from 2000. And as you can see, George W. Bush had 47.9% of the popular vote, 50 million votes, and Al Gore at 51 million. Yet he lost the election because he lost in the Electoral College. So it's a complex system and it's unsatisfying. Let's say you have been chosen, you've won in the primaries, you've won the Electoral College. Now it's time to become president. And to do that, you recite an oath, the oath of allegiance. Each president recites the same oath on the 20th of January of the year after the election. So between November and January, the president is known as the president-elect. On the 20th of January, the president-elect becomes the new president, saying these words, "I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States."